We were working under agenda item number 5, Executive Officer's Report, and we completed the status update of delegated entities. We pushed the IKF to their own agenda item, where we can discuss that. So at the request of our Executive Officer and people's commitments, we're going to move up, Andy, the, what item is this one? Where am I?
Agenda item number 8, sir.
We're going to now take up item number 8, Commissioners, so we can get our experts here and then let them go. So item number 8, discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of the revised Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts as adopted by the Association of Boxing Commissions at their annual meeting in Las Vegas in August 2016. Mr. Foster.
Mr. Chairman, the ABC voted at the August meeting and by a vote of 42-1 to make several changes to the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts. I can't stress to this commission how exceedingly rare that is. It's a big deal. I've asked referee John McCarthy to come and to kind of go over each one of the rules with the commission. Mike Beltran is also here if he needs a partner, if you need any explanation, certainly from the downed opponent perspective of the rule.
Never mind, keep going.
As Dr. Williams can attest, the Medical Advisory Committee met this past Saturday, recommended to the Commission the adoption of these rules, or the authorization of these rules. Certainly here, I recommend it to the Commission, and Mr. Chairman, with your permission at this time, I would just, unless you have questions for me, let Mr. McCarthy explain the rule changes.
Please, gentlemen, Mike, come on up, please, and introduce yourselves. Andy, if you could also let the commissioners know about your involvement at the ABC. You're on the committee. I can remember the names.
I'm the head of the ABC Medical Committee. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. The reason I'm the head of the medical committee is the medical committee requires a voting member under the new administration. So basically, I just am the note taker for a group of doctors, okay? And the group of doctors on the medical committee at the ABC also unanimously authorized to the ABC body recommendation to adopt these rules. Now, let me say this. There were a few changes, specifically with the downward pointed elbow strikes that did not make it through the ABC Medical Committee. Okay, so it never made it through. So that was one of the proposed changes. Never saw the light of day because the medical committee felt like that could potentially put the fighters in more danger. Okay, what we're left with has been through a vetting process of 20 or 30 physicians, cumulative.
Also, I was there too at the ABC convention, so there was a lot of discussion. But at the end, it was passed.
Excellent. Would you gentlemen please introduce yourselves and please give us some information? Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm John McCarthy.
Hi, Mike Beltran.
What occurred with the Unified Rules, what Andy's been, if you go back and look, the Unified Rules came about back in April of 2001 is when several promotions were brought together and several people, and we came up with this group of rules that we decided would be the best for moving mixed martial arts forward. And if you look, there has not been any changes other than the adding of 115-pound male division or anything in 15 years. And the sport, like any sport, needs to evolve. The NFL goes through changes every year. NBA does the same thing. Well, in mixed martial arts, it's been a slow process, and there's a lot of reasons behind it. But what came about is a new committee was put together for rule changes. That committee had several people that were officials. I was one of them. Several fighters that were of the past, all retired, being Randy Couture, who was a multi-time champion with the UFC, Matt Hughes, who was a 9-time champion with UFC as far as defending his belt as a welterweight, Jeremy Horn, who was individual, has probably fought more high-level MMA fights than anybody else. He has well over 150 professional fights. So it was them along with doctors, David Watson being one from Nevada, he was on the board. And our whole purpose is looking at what was out there in mixed martial arts right now that really has no purpose. There were several rule changes as far as what we try to do is grabbing the clavicle was something that was put into the unified rules. I hate to say it, but it was at the end of the day, someone had this thing where they had somebody who they knew that could pull your clavicle out of your body and, do something. And we got to the point we got tired of arguing about stuff, and they just let it go because it was stupid. And so that one of the first things that we said is, let's get rid of the stupidity. And we took grabbing the clavicle. I can tell you, I've been with MMA since the very beginning. And when it was legal, no one ever tried it. And when it was illegal, it was never a foul that anyone's ever called. And it's not going to change the sport. It's not going to endanger fighters. So it was one of the first things to get rid of. The next one that has some people with concern was heel kicks to the kidney was something that was a rule for a long time. And if you go back and you watch UFC 1 with Royce Gracie, you'll see him against Ken Shamrock where he pulls Ken Shamrock into guard and he starts doing this heel kick to Ken's back. And in MMA right now, state of California, we allow full force punches, elbows, knees, kicks to the kidney. But we can't have this low velocity being in guard and having someone this heel kick. The real reason for the heel kick is to try to get someone to move. But the truth is what happens now is it tells the person who is on the top, he's opened his guard, I'm going to pass his guard. And really what it's going to do is if someone tries to do it, it's going to open up the game and make the game proceed along the way it should instead of it slowing it down. And I can tell you as someone who's been hit with enough of them, there's no force behind it that's going to do any damage to you. So that was one of the fouls that we took away. Several other things that we decided that were important. We wanted to put in a rule. Fighters are smart. They adjust to the rules all the time. And so one of the things that we came up with back in 2001 was what we considered a grounded fighter. And we took it from boxing because in boxing, once the fighter is, standing, anything other than the soles of their feet that touches the ground, they're a down fighter. And we took that same concept in MMA and put forth that, okay, anything more than the soles of the feet, the fighter becomes a grounded fighter. Well, fighters were smart enough to quickly say, well, you know what? When I get put into some bad situations, and I get put against, we'll say, the cage, and I have someone that can actually knee me to the face or something, I can take my hand and put my fingertips down to the ground. That makes me a grounded fighter. And then they would take their fingertips and they pick them up and then they put it down. And they pick them up and they put it down. And it became this game that was unfair to the person who had the advantageous position. And it became unsafe because they would see what they thought was the hand coming up, and they would throw the knee and the hand would go down and the knee would connect. And we had referees stopping the fight, pulling the fighters apart, assessing fouls, sometimes disqualifying people that should not have been disqualified based upon a true error in the rule and the way that it was now being used. So we went about looking and trying to decide what would be the best way to say that a fighter was down now. And we're utilizing things very similar to the NFL with a running back or a receiver with the ball. Anytime they put a hand down, they're not down. But any other part of their body that hits the ground, they're a grounded fighter. So we had this position where when a fighter's on his feet, instead of being able to put just one hand down, because we had altered the actual intent of the thing by telling fighters over the last 2 years, basically, you have to put your hand down with weight bearing on it, fist down, you couldn't put your fingertips, and we were altering the actual rule. And so we went about looking, saying what was best, and the best thing that we came up with is for a fighter to be on his feet, because that's normally the place they're going to be, is on their feet against the cage wall. Instead of being able to just put one hand down to make yourself down, you're going to have to put both hands down. And the real thing is, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do that because then it opens them up to be hit. It opens them up for chokes. It opens them up in a place that if they decide, you know what, I need to be down, they're going to put their knee to the ground. They'll still be a grounded fighter, and they cannot be kneed or kicked to the face. So we're trying to adjust the position.
This is like 15 years of experience that you, all
This is-
come together and come up with these, right?
And, it's us testing, and, we're getting punched in the face, so, okay, put your hand down, we're gonna see, and you're trying to dodge things, and it's not a good position. It tells you, I'm not gonna do that. So what we're trying to do is alter what the fighters are gonna do. There are gonna be people, the state of New Jersey was very much against it, saying that we're trying to hurt fighters. This is not gonna hurt fighters at all. What we're really doing is, the fighter that's in the good position, we're not making it a bad position for him. Also, with the fighter that's in the good position, many times it was difficult to tell when a person's hand was down, just because of the way you are over the top, you can't see. Now, when they put both, you can tell. And so the onus goes on that fighter to know when when their opponent is down, and they know when they can launch an attack or not, based upon them putting themselves in that position. They also know that what they can do now to attack their opponent in a legal fashion.
Right. So, gentlemen, we have, I can see at least 27. So maybe we could open this up to questions of,
Yeah, the
have a
one,
dialogue with
the
you.
one thing that's, there's one more rule that was added to being a foul. Fighters, to this day, started doing a thing where they would take their hand and extend their hand out towards their opponent with their fingers open. Being that we don't have gloves that cover the fingers, we have a lot of eye pokes. And we looked at it and said, that's very dangerous for our fighters. We don't want to take that away. So anytime that a fighter extends their hand out in a way that their fingers are extended towards their opponent's face, the referee at the time really couldn't do anything until the eye poke occurred. So now we're saying that if you put your hand in that position, the referee has the ability to tell you, hey, close your hand or put your fingers up. And if you continually disregard what they're telling you, there's a foul that they can actually start to either take points or take you out of the fight based upon it, where you cannot extend your fingers towards your opponent's eyes.
We should probably point out, we've actually tested that rule
Yep.
in camo for, 18 months? 18 months, and we haven't had a corneal scrape in that time, right?
And then also,
So, you want to continue to make comments or ask questions, Commissioner Martha?
The last thing that was changed, so you know, is there was a criteria change as far as the judging criteria. The judging criteria comes back from 1999 is when it was written. I was one of the dummies that wrote it. And I've told people for a long time it was antiquated, it needed to be changed. So I have changed it. I was the one that wrote this one up. And the whole purpose is to clarify for judges into a more clear idea of what we give credit for in the fight. We had 4 criteria before, being that we were not, anything we looked at was effective striking, effective grappling, effective ringer cage control, and effective aggressiveness. And with the new criteria and what we're instructing the judges towards is, there's only 2 elements that make up the fight. That's the effective striking and the effective grappling. That is what they should be giving all of the credit to. If off of those 2 elements, they cannot determine who the winner of that is, then they will go to effective aggressiveness, and the last thing they'll go to, the first thing they'll go to is ringer cage control, the person that controlled the fight, and the last thing they'll go to is the aggressiveness to say who the winner of that round is.
That's under this mission statement and the clarification of judging criteria.
Yep.
Commissioner, do you have other questions or comments? These gentlemen? Dr. Williams? No. Vice Chair here?
Just a question, the one opposing vote, was that New Jersey?
That's New Jersey.
Was that the woman that was screaming? Because I was there too.
Yes, that was the woman that was screaming.
Okay, all right.
She
I
took.
don't know her, having lived in New Jersey.
I was advised that I needed to learn things about MMA, and that's okay.
Okay.
No, she said someone should teach you
To
something.
teach me it, yeah. That's
Commissioner
it.
Souter?
I mean, if the authorities say that's the right thing, it's the right thing. Just a question I would have, if we adapt the association's standards, rules, will that in the future inhibit your organization and you and your colleagues?
Toward you.
Will that in the future inhibit an effort on the part of our referees and our executive director from deviating and finding new things that should be done? Or does this mean that we will forever, in effect, be adopting whatever the commission.
I would tell you, sir, the one thing that is, in my mind, one of the most important things that we can do is, the problem with boxing and MMA is we have state athletic commissions, and they're all different. And if you look at the NFL, you can play a game in San Francisco, today, and go to New York tomorrow, and you're going to play under the same rules. That's the way the sport of football is. That's the way the sport of MMA should be. I believe that this commission should always follow what the unified rules say, because that's what's best for our officials. It's what's best for our fighters. The fighters should not have to change what they've been training to do because all of a sudden they cross a state line and now this one state decides to do something completely different. It's unfair to them. The more that we can be straight across the board, everybody in line, the better our sport is.
I see and acknowledge and accept that standard. I'm just curious, are there other rules, if you will, of the association that we are not in harmony with? Or are we close enough that all this is a perfectly natural melding?
We're very close on everything. There's always going to be rules that someone will look at and say, everyone has personal beliefs, and depending upon what their belief system is, they could say, well, I don't like this type of kick. I don't think a knee in this position should be allowed.
Do your colleagues agree with you on all this?
Yes, sir.
I have nothing, no questions.
I cannot think of a scenario where this doesn't benefit the, and go to our mission, Andy, but, and including, in somehow inhibiting us from being competitive to get, attract events here, correct?
Absolutely, sir, and if you'll notice in your packet, I included the letters from the two largest stakeholders, both in California and the world, both the Ultimate Fighting Championship and Bellator.
And let me say to you, by the way, this section, this presentation is very, very good. Very detailed, very, very clear.
I wanted to watch
well
you
done.
submit Beltran.
You don't need to see it again.
Mr. Beltran, add something to this?
I agree with everything he said for the most part. I think it's only going to make the sport a lot better and as a consistency across the board. So it's still fairly new, we're still evolving, we're still learning from it, but we got to start here, and what better person to do it than John McCarthy,
Right.
setting the standard. So I agree.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here, and he's obviously, John's one of ours here from California, but he is you want to be the godfather of MMA? I'll give you that one. Commissioners, Andy, do you have anything else you want to add here before we take an action to take a motion? Anybody? How about we have a motion then to approve these, do I need anything specific to say here other than a motion to approve the?
All you need is just a motion to authorize and approve, basically provide the commission stamp of approval on the new rules.
Don't we have to adopt it?
We do not.
No.
No.
We do not.
No.
Rule 533.
Right.
We haven't went back, but Rule 533, I can read it to you. Recognizing that different forms of martial arts exist, notwithstanding any rule in this division to the contrary, the commission may, in its discretion, authorize alternate rules or provisions from time to time for full contact martial arts, championships and exhibitions, so long as the safety and welfare of the contestants and the public are not jeopardized.
Okay, then,
Ultimately, this regulatory body is, and its governing statutes and your regulations is supreme as far as governing the combative sports in the state of California. So getting back to Commissioner Sauter's question with regards to if there's some rule or regulation or something within the unified rules that deviate and which, in the eyes of this commission, is not in the public interest of the health and safety of the athletes, we can deviate from those rules.
May I have a motion to authorize the revised uniform rules
so
for
move.
MMA? We have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second from Dr. Williams. Mr. Foster, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Carvelli,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Lehman,
Aye.
Commissioner Senior Quidez,
Aye.
Commissioner Souter, Commissioner and Dr. Williams.
Aye.
It's 5-0, sir.
Congratulations, and thank you very much for all your good work, gentlemen. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Not even a kimura, not even like a anaconda.
There's grumbling going on up here, which is not on the record. Okay, we have other guests here that I hate to see sitting while we continue to do our business. So let's get them here now. Andy, if we could. So why don't we go to our subcommittee updates, if we could. Item number 6, agenda item number 6. And in no particular order, but the way it's written here, let's start with A, Pension Fund Subcommittee Commissioners Lehman and Ayala. Here's Sub-I, report from Beth Harrington from Benefit Resources regarding our pension fund administration. Welcome. Mr. Foster, would you set this up for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Annually, once a year, the commission likes to talk with the two entities that administer the pension fund on behalf of the commission. Ms. Harrington works with the office, working on getting the claims from the fighters, putting together the actuary calculations. So we work with her on that, and that's totally separate from what Mr. Shaw does, which is he invests the money as Raymond James representative, and has been successful in that endeavor. And, obviously this is an approximation, but the commission has an approximate contribution to the pension fund of about $87,000 a year over the last 5 years, and has given out an approximation of $295,000 per year. I would point that out to the commissioners. If you're giving out over 3 times what you're taking in, even though the pension fund is a relatively small part of the commission, it seems to me that would be working. I mean, at least we can certainly do better. We've just mentioned the pension fund at the World Boxing Council's annual meeting. There's 177 athletes that are due a pension that we're looking for right now, trying to find them. But by and large, 87,000 contributions, and then giving out close to 300,000. And that, I just point that out to the commission. That seems reasonable to me.
Would you introduce yourself again, please? And
Thank you, Commissioners, and thank you, Mr. Foster. I'm Beth Harrington with Benefit Resources. I have been the administrator for the pension plan since it converted from a traditional defined benefit type plan to a more defined contribution type plan in 1996. So I was actually engaged in 1999. The assets in the plan are a little over $5 million. We'll talk about, I'll show you some charts in a minute, and you've seen those in your packet. We have 340 covered boxers or vested boxers with their benefits worth about $3.9 million. Of the 64 boxers who were eligible for a distribution in 2016, we have paid benefits to 14 of them for a total of $225,000. One of the things that I wanted to point out to you since my last presentation is we have forfeited benefits for some what we call late claimants. These are boxers who are over age 53 who failed to come forward to request benefits. As Andy was just mentioning, there are several people we're trying to find. 113 of those benefits have been forfeited, and that represents about $1.6 million in potential liability to the pension.
Can we just clarify? I know when I first came on the commission, it was confusing, is that the forfeiture, it's not really a forfeiture of benefits, it's just that the funds go somewhere else, they don't really grow, that the boxers can still get their benefits, it's not forfeited in the common
That is correct. It
language
is
of the
simply
term.
forfeited until they come forward. You're
Right.
exactly right. And we did reallocate those monies, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but we can skip to that if you'd like.
Remember when you worked on those changes? Did we change the terminology forfeiture? I thought we did.
Yes.
So how come we're
because-
not using the new word?
Right, because this is public, and so when the public hears that word, they will think that they are no longer entitled to that. So when
Right.
the chairman and I worked on the document, we took that word out so that people don't.
I don't disagree. I fail to remember what that other term is. I apologize.
So it's just a reallocation of funds.
Okay.
So for purpose of your presentation, because I know the word forfeiture is in a lot of the charts that you thankfully did, can we just say the word reallocation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, no problem. I did include some detail about the numbers of boxers in the report that were summarized in the memo. Again, we have 340 covered boxers. We have about 1,000 boxers who are what we call pending. That means they're currently fighting, and but they have not yet become covered. Their benefits are about $1 million. We have, if they broke in service, meaning they hadn't boxed 36 rounds in a 3-year period, they lose their benefits and those get reallocated. We do have a suspense account to help offset some of the liabilities for late claimants that may come in. But that suspense account has gotten pretty small. It's about $140,000. As these numbers are all as of December 31st, 2015, which is the last time I did a full evaluation of the pension. We do have about $1 million due to boxers eligible for distributions this year. That's 64 people. So far in 2016, we have paid $225,000 or so. Last year in 2015, we had 8 boxers who failed to request benefits, and $225,000 of those benefits were reallocated. Questions on the numbers of boxers before we move on to the next?
I might just point out to the commissioners, we have a few in the hopper that are coming, okay? So I believe what you're looking at least on the one chart, was from Beth hasn't got a few of the ones yet that we're going to be sending her, okay? We've got a few in the office, and it's in the process.
We put together a few charts, just so that you could have a visual of what's happening with the pension. The first is the equity or the value of the account over the past 6 years. The 2016 number is obviously a work in process. It includes the Raymond James account as of October 31st, which was the last statement that I had when I prepared these charts. It does not include the SMIF account, the checking account, the operating account that is run at DCA, which last year was about $130,000. I would only point out that the assets have gone down mostly because distributions have gone up, and that's the whole point of the plan, so I think that's a good thing. The second chart shows the distributions that have been paid over the past 6 years and year-to-date in 2016.
And 2016, like I said, will go up by the time the end of the year happens, because we've got some more that's coming.
The third chart shows the number of participants who have been paid benefits. And I'd like to commend the commission, because since they've really put a push on finding people who have benefits, there's been a lot more people getting paid, which I think is a good thing.
The 177 people, folks, fighters, Andy, how did you identify these 177? Or did you do that?
Well, there's 113 who had already had their benefits reallocated, and then there were 64 who are currently in the payment window between age 50 and age 53. So those people stay in that window for 3 years, and we actively try to find those. I should say the commission does. So if you add those two numbers, you get your 177.
We've had some contact with them, and now we can't have we don't have further contact, or we've never been in contact with them? Can you,
Some of these people came into the pension in 1996 with benefits, but they scatter like the wind. Some of them go back to their native countries, and I think that's just been a challenge with finding them. I don't know what your experience has been.
That's correct.
well, sure, they go back to their native countries, or they're, heaven forbid, something worse happens to them.
Yes.
How do we, there's no way to know that, is there?
No, sir, that's been the challenge.
Right, right.
If we knew, we would pay them, or their families.
Or at least mark them as ineligible at some point, right? Because,
And that's when we reallocate the benefits, because we haven't been able to locate them, even through valiant efforts of the commission and outreach to, I think, every meeting you go to everywhere across the country,
Oh,
you mention
I
it.
know we're doing that. I'm just trying to understand the definition of the metrics on the 177 people. So is there, I don't remember. I don't think there's like some timeline either, like if they don't show up within 3 years, they're,
That would be a big,
Right.
but their money does go in and starts earning money for everybody else.
Right.
right,
That's,
okay. Thank you for reminding me. Okay,
That's correct.
thanks,
so it's
thanks.
not a waste.
The last of the charts that I have is just the contribution history, so that, as Mr. Foster was indicating, the average is about 97,000. It goes up and down every year, depending on the number of fights that have pension contributions, obviously. Any questions on the data charts?
So I guess my questions are, as we pay out more each year, because obviously we are, and that is the hope, that we pay out more each year. I mean, the WBC, all the sanctioning bodies are helping us. They have more outreach overseas. I think after the last meeting, I went to the California Boxing Hall of Fame. I passed out about, so hopefully that will help, but obviously that will start dwindling. And as Andy said, our pay-in is smaller than our payout. So one of my concerns is, and has been, the allocations. And how does, because I'm not an expert on pensions, how do we compare in how our fund is performing on the allocation side? And unlike, 401K or one of those where we have no control, or we don't control the allocation side, should we be moving these things around? How is that performing? And does it compare to the national average? Is it below? Is it above?
So those are very good questions, and you have a very unique plan. I don't know of any plan that's quite like this one. We allocate the contributions that are made pro rata based on rounds and purse. So somebody might fight 16 rounds and have $3 million in purse, and somebody might fight 30 rounds and have $800 in purse, So the allocation is based on rounds and purse. I don't know of any other fund in the country that's like this.
There's not.
Martha, is your question like a Raymond James question, perhaps?
This is more Raymond James.
Yeah.
They're coming.
They're separate than her, yeah.
He's coming, yeah.
But I would like to point out that every year we have several boxers who fail to fight the 36 rounds in 3 years, so they forfeit benefits. Last year, that was about $180,000. Plus, we have the,
Not forfeited.
excuse me,
Was- okay.
the boxers who fail to vest lose their benefits. So those are reallocated to the
Completely
other.
lost?
There you go.
They're reallocated to the other
They
participants.
actually don't get their benefits.
Okay, so they're permanently lost.
Yeah.
If they come back, once they're lost, they're lost.
Okay.
Yeah,
If they come back to fight, we would
don't?
take that into consideration, but we track month by month, did they fight and did they have their 36 rounds in a 36 rolling month period?
because they don't qualify is the problem for.
So they never vest.
They never vest.
Okay.
It also begs a question about having someone advise them about that, right? How would they possibly know unless someone sat them down and said, hey, you're 5 rounds away, you're one more bout away from getting these benefits. Maybe you want to take a fight, right?
That's a lot of money that you're
Right.
potentially losing.
Right. So we haven't thought about that, have we?
We do provide the commission with statements for every boxer, whether they're pending or covered every year. I'm not sure if we can find all of the people for whom we provide statements, but
This is a very
that's,
complicated thing. I mean, this commission was really very remiss for a long time in even understanding what this commission until 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So you can imagine what a boxer is not even gonna understand this, even if you translate this into whatever their native language is. So I think just doing normal outreach is not gonna be enough.
so we could prepare a memo that goes to the boxers and/or the promoters or the people who run them. I'm not as familiar with the process as you are, that just explains the terms in one page. In fact, I think we do have a summary that I prepared
Right.
with the commission or with the folks at CSAC several years ago,
We have that, right? Yeah.
where they have to fight 70, I think it's 72 rounds in 4 years. They don't have to be consecutive in order to fully vest, but they lose their benefits if they don't fight at least 10 rounds in 36 months.
Does information about our pension go out with the licenses?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In Spanish too?
It's two-sided, ma'am. English on one side and Spanish.
Okay, but that's just the flyer that says you're eligible, but not about how it works?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
So maybe that's something we should look at.
Okay.
I know it's going to be hard to do it simply but accurately, you know, how it works, so many rounds, so many months,
And then,
so people would know at the front end.
and then the eligibility is when there's a particular year when this pension started, 1980.
1996 is when this version started.
When this version started. But when the, okay, 90s. So I think there's an official that has a radio show, he's been announcing it. There are people that are calling in. And there are people that have been calling in, but they don't know what year when they started fighting, they're eligible, things like that. Maybe we can get that information out to the people who have been going on the radio to advertise this.
So that's another great idea, but it reminds me of, frankly, what I do for a living. We have, it's a dental benefits company, and we have call centers, right, and trained people. But so what we do when you have many, many members, it's just like your health benefits. You try to get them to call in and speak to somebody that can help them. Because trying to send out stuff in brochures, it's virtually impossible. So we've got to, it's reach out to contact us.
We
is
pay a
the way
pro
that-
rata
yeah.
for an 800 number. Right? We pay a pro rata for an 800 number that we kind of don't use. Could we set up a 800 number?
I'll look into that.
Okay.
And do you have a person on staff that, you do, right? I can't recall that when a fighter does call in and want to know about their benefits, who do you put, it's you, so, okay.
Sylvia typically
Yeah.
takes those calls, and if there's any question, or she can't find them on the latest report, she'll contact our office, and we'll let them know if their benefits were reallocated before, if they're eligible for any benefits, what their status is, et cetera.
That's good.
So maybe, Andy, it's all about another wave of, hey, call in to these folks. Call Sophia, call Beth, call this number. We will explain how this works to you.
Okay.
And in your language, and we'll help you with that as well.
Sure, because we have Alma in the office, Alma Maya, she's in the office, she speaks really, really good Spanish, and there have been several boxers that's called, and she's able to walk them through it, and she's actually got a claim or two just from her talking, and she's helped them fill out the form and the whole thing.
Sophia?
One more thing that we did, I believe Andy, he shared this with you guys in his weekly reports, that I reached out to our Division of Investigation and provided them our list. And, because they have access to DMV records, they have access to other systems that Department of Justice that we don't. And they are law enforcement. And they ran that list and provided me with updated addresses so that I could reach out to more. That's great. So that helped a little bit, but a lot of the addresses were the same that I had already.
The last thing I wanted to point out is the suspense account summary. There was a period of time where we were not reallocating money after a participant had attained age 53, so we went through a big sweep. That big sweep was a little over $1 million. We were holding back 20% of any current year forfeitures, so we held 20% back of that, and then we reallocated one-third, one-third, one-third. We finished our reallocation in 2015, so all of those benefits, with the exception of the bottom line number, 139,000, have been reallocated to boxers. The 139,000 is just left for any late claimants who may come to the forefront after we had reallocated their benefits.
Do we have a plan if for some reason we get more claimants than that 139,000?
So I believe that the way that the regulations got revisited is, in the event that our suspense account is insufficient, we would use current year forfeitures. So if, reallocations for people who fail to earn benefits.
Okay.
They're leaving money behind every year, so we
Right,
would
okay.
attach that first.
Okay, but to the best of our ability, we think that this certain set aside of 139 is,
So we're still setting aside 20% a year, even if we don't need to dip into that, but that's a question that I would, just pose.
but
to
they
the-
are in some kind of investment account?
All of them are investment accounts, yes.
Even though 139?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So every person has an allocation of a dollar amount at the end of each year, and then the suspense account is the only amount that's not allocated to any particular fighter.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions for Beth? Let me say this again to both of you. Great presentation, really good information, well summarized, very clear. I love the forfeiture summary. That's good news. I wasn't aware of that, or I guess I forgot about it, so thank you. Don't go away. Why don't you just sit up here?
I'm not.
And let's invite Mr. Shaw up and... Tell us about our $5 million and how we're doing.
Chair Crivelli and Commissioners, I'm Cyril Shaw with Raymond James Financial, and we handle the investment side of the professional boxers' pension plan. And I'm not sure if, Mr. Foster, if you want to tee this up at all, or I can get right into my presentation.
Please go, and thanks
Okay.
for coming, Cyril.
And I'm going to be referring to this document with the pie chart and the bar chart that is in your staff report. Yeah, pass this statement.
Got it.
Investment overview. So I'm going to, it'll be a fairly brief presentation and just going to touch on the performance of the pension fund and the investments, the allocation, and I would like to address why the allocation is the way that it is, the percentages that they are. And then also just open it up to questions and conversation if you'd like to get into any more detail. So working from the top left, there you can see the portfolio performance. Year to date, this is as of December 2nd, in order to get it into your packets in time. Our year-to-date performance of the fund is 5%. And you may recall that in January, we had the equity market, stock market, had the worst beginning, the worst month of January that we've seen in recent history. Equities were down over 10%. There were a number of reasons for that. And that prompted me to send to Mr. Foster an email summarizing how our pension fund was doing during that stressful period for the capital markets. And because of our conservative allocation, which I'll get to next, the account actually held up extremely well during that period. And it's and I credit this allocation and the conservatism of it with why it's able to withstand shocks like what happened in January or the shock that happened after the Brexit vote in late June. And the reason that we approached, the way that we approached the allocation when Raymond James first took this over in 2007 is we looked at what Commissioner Shen-Urquidez pointed out is the number of participants that are vested, and that could, if on any given day, we found them all, and they all stepped forward and wanted to begin collecting their benefits, would this pension fund be able to withstand those types of drawdowns? And in order to do that, we figured that the less volatile the portfolio, the better served the Boxers will be and the commission will be.
I'm sorry to understand, the less what, the portfolio?
The less volatile.
Volatile.
Yeah, sorry. The less volatile the portfolio, the better served the Boxers and the commission will be. So essentially, going over to the asset allocation, at a very high level, we're roughly 70%, 30%. 70% fixed income or bonds, more conservative investments, and cash alternatives, and about 30% equities. And most of that is large cap or large company stocks, a small amount of international investments as well. And this allocation and the underlying investments have led to what this year has been $245,000 plus in investment gains as of the second. It's actually a bit better as of today. And $200,000 of those gains have been transferred to the commission for distributions to participants. And I'm very happy to report that since our involvement, Raymond James' involvement in becoming the investment advisor and in working with the commission, and this is back, it's been 9 years now, we've had over $2 million in gains in asset growth, over $1.5 million of which has been transferred to the commission and paid out to professional boxers.
5% return, basically?
Yeah, 4.9 as of December 2nd. As I mentioned, we're about 60 basis points, I didn't mention this part, but we're about 60 basis points higher now, so we're about 5.5% year to date as of today.
Because we're gonna cap over the 20,000 Dow, huh?
Well, actually, a lot of that performance has been, I mean, just, the last 2 weeks, over half of 1%, so it's helping. It definitely is helping.
Do you happen to know the return that CalPERS fund gets?
Off the top of my head, no, but I do on occasion when they do their annual report out for their fiscal year. Maybe it's my competitive nature is that I compare our fund to how CalPERS and CalSTRS are doing, and it's a completely different objective, completely different set of participants, but we are outperforming both CalPERS and CalSTRS as of their last fiscal year end.
Do you know about how much, just generally speaking?
Off the top of my head, no, not right now, but I can get that information for you.
It'd be interesting to see how we're doing with the only other pension fund in California.
Right.
Please go ahead.
At this point, just like to open it up for any additional questions or comments.
Yeah, I have a question, Commissioner Lehman. How come we have so much in cash? 918,000, almost $1 million in cash and cash alternatives.
So of that 918,000, if you turn to the next page, and I apologize for the small print, but only 80,000 of that is in actual cash money market, earning very little yield. What else is categorized is cash are 1 to 3 year corporate bonds, 1 to 3 year treasuries, and other short-term fixed income that are yielding, at least those two are yielding 1.5 and 3/4 of 1% respectively.
Okay. So 2%, 3% yield for our cash? Is that high? I noticed that our distributions maximum per year have been 250,000, 300,000, so it seems kind of almost overkill to keep almost $1 million in cash?
Well, like, as I mentioned, it's about 80,000 that's in cash, so that's only
In
about.
low yield,
Right.
short term.
Yes, and the reason for what we're doing, it's a trade-off essentially, is that we're accepting that low yield in return for security, yes, would be a great way to put it, or less volatility.
Thank you.
Not necessarily, I'm sorry.
No, I said thank you.
not necessarily available for Andy to call and say, we need to write a check. That's another process, correct?
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again?
For distributions. It's not cash on hand for distributions.
Right,
This is part of your asset allocation.
exactly, yes.
Got it. We should change it.
So I know Commissioner Martha has questions, but since she's not speaking up yet, predict the future for me, advisor. So, they're raising interest rates now, or Fed rates, and they're going to do them again. And is that going to affect this fund? How do you see those going?
So actually, it's a great question, and with a conservative allocation like this, what we look at as a potential risk to the portfolio is a rise in interest rates, particularly an unexpected spike in interest rates, because that will hurt the fixed income side of our portfolio. Of course, if equities go down, then that would hurt that 30% allocation there as well. With what the Federal Open Market Committee has projected for 2017, 3 rate hikes, we don't foresee a huge spike or change in interest rates. And so what that means is that we'll continue to collect our interest and dividends from the fixed income side, and hopefully get appreciation from the equity side. So we expect fixed income to stay stable and moderate growth from the equity side for the next calendar year.
I think he's telling us to invest in equities, folks.
It's like CalPERS 13.3% annualized rate since 1985, but they're targeting 8.5%.
Yeah, they definitely have a much higher equity allocation. So going back to 85, I'm not sure how we've done, but over the last fiscal year, I think that ended June 30th for them, or September 30th, we definitely outperformed.
They're more volatile.
No, it's true.
I think I just read in the paper that they're going to get back together and lower their expectations, their investment, their return expectations.
Right.
That's not good.
Thank you.
We're not doing that.
No.
No.
We're being less volatile.
Commissioner Shanakita, you've been too quiet.
So when the allocations because the allocations will fluctuate between your reports.
Right.
Sometimes they fluctuate quite a bit. So like the cash and cash alternatives, I've seen them fluctuate, say, between 18 plus and 12, even 13 plus %. How do you, when you see that, how do you adjust for that? And do you go in and move things around? I mean, and then how do you determine, okay, I need to do something about this allocation? Like, what are the measures that then you decide, okay, this is now not okay, and then I'm going to move stuff around?
Right. No, it's a very good question. Thank you. So one thing that changes the allocation, which would be more of the minor changes, is just the organic fluctuation in the investments themselves. If the stock portion grows, then the fixed income portion, the cash portion, will shrink. But fortunately, as far as the larger allocation shifts, there's a lot of individuals and a lot of very smart people working behind the scenes that help make those determinations. There is an investment committee that consists of Raymond James chief market strategist, chief economist, and about 5 others. And they use forward-looking assumptions to try and predict where capital markets will be 12 months, 24 months out. And so, and you mentioned the fluctuation in cash. One of the reasons for that, the increase in the shorter term fixed income, was in anticipation of higher interest rates, the Fed raising interest rates, which they have. So that is what prompted us to go to shorter term fixed income. If that wasn't the case, then we might be further out on the curve. On the yield curve.
How often are you able to take a look at this and then shift allocations?
So The shifts to the allocation, probably, we rebalance every year on a particular day so that we're not veering too far from our base allocation. As far as changes to the actual allocation, significant changes, typically only once or twice a year. This is meant to be long-term, and we're not trying to predict, what the hot sector or hot asset class is going to be for the next 3 months or 6 months.
Do you have a target for this portfolio, or is it just relative to everything else?
There is, in our investment policy statement, there is a target rate of return, and I can get, I don't have it with me, but I can get you a copy of it. If off the top of my head, so don't hold me to this, but I'll get you that information. I want to say that it's 5.5% is our targeted rate of return, 5.5.
So is the IRR different for this kind of this kind of pension fund than, say, a 401k or any other kind of pension fund?
Yes, and one of the reasons, comparing it to a 401k plan, for example, or an individual's IRA, is that if it's your 401k or my IRA, we need those assets to last through our life expectancy. So, if we're doing planning for an individual or a family, we'll plan to age 90 for those assets to last. For the pension fund, this needs to last in perpetuity because there are professional boxers today that may not be collecting benefits for a couple decades from now. And so what that, once again, forces us to do is be more conservative so that the longevity, so the assets are preserved and the longevity of the fund is there 5 years, 20 years from now.
Is the expectation with this pension fund that at some point we're going to adjust so that, because we're paying out more than we're actually collecting, that we are going to need to adjust the formula so that we're either taking in more money or we're paying, you know what I mean? So, or
Well, over the last handful of years, we've been fortunate in that our investment returns have been greater than the amount that's actually withdrawn from this pension fund, added to the other funds, and then distributed to boxers. So, for example, this year, our investment returns are $245,000 plus, and we've transferred $200,000 out of the pension fund for distributions. So we've been for the last 5 years or so, we've been able to maintain this $5 million asset level while still transferring assets out for distributions. So
Is that a trend that we can accept and kind of rely upon, then, a 5-year trend of?
well, we, over 5 years.
Said no.
Yeah.
We're going to find more boxers. to
yeah, we're
give them
sort of
their money.
working
Yeah.
against our
We're gonna be
own.
good at
We
that.
know what our
Right.
goals and objectives are, but the numbers are the numbers. Is it a trend? I mean,
So if we can assume that, like I said, let's call it a best-case scenario, that there's 64 eligible, I think that was the number, 64 eligible boxers, and of the 14 have come forward, the other 50 come forward tomorrow, then will the value of the pension fund be $5 million 1 year from now? Probably not, but based on how much the current rate of distributions, which have increased definitely over the last handful of years.
but the returns have outpaced it.
Yes.
So we have a 5-year trend. So I'm trying to get you to tell me that that's something that we can rely on unless we have, all the magic that we're working on happens and we can find all these people, which is frankly a tall order, obviously.
So keeping the roughly the amount of distributions, let's say we keep that static, then it depends very much on the performance of the underlying investments. So the performance of stock market, a fixed income market, and interest rates. So while I'd like to be able to say, yes, absolutely, 5 years from now, we're going to have the same or more in assets if distributions stay static. We're not in the business of guaranteeing that.
So So if we assume that we are successful and we actually do what we're supposed to do, which is find a lot more boxers, even if you assume that the interest rate stays the way that it does and nothing goes haywire, then we need to find a way to add to this pension fund,
Will we find a way to add to it?
to add to the,
increase the
to
Oh.
increase the pool, to increase the fund.
Well, actually, we got more contributions this year than any year previously because of all the events that we've had. I saw that on the chart.
Yes and no, because we also decreased in the last, from a couple of years ago, the amount that we were collecting per.
Also increased what we were contributing.
Look, I don't know if we're going to.
It's 88 cents a
Contribution
ticket.
history, yeah, we have
Somewhat.
88 cents a ticket.
2010.
So, Martha,
So,
I understand completely what you're saying. So what do we do about it, though, if anything? Do we have a contingency plan in place that in the event it starts to trend up significantly, here's what we're gonna need to do?
right, we don't have so we need to actually talk about that. I mean, right now, the way that it is, if it stays the way it is, I think we're fine. But should something happen and we suddenly find all these boxers and/or that something happens with the interest rate, I think we're gonna be in trouble.
Well, why are we in trouble? I mean, it's a pension fund, it's an investment. No one has, you know, we don't always have to have $5 million in there.
No, we don't.
So if the fund goes down, then so be it. It's increased now because we have people who are not claiming, but there's no, it's just a share of an investment.
I think for the sake of the boxers, you always want to be able to have a fund that they will be able to collect from.
Should we not say to our counselor, who has served us well, that there are a lot of intangibles, and he should do for us a 5-year projection based on whatever Andy's most realistic vision is as to the number of fighters who show up, and look at that plan. And then we factor in a parallel circumstance where 20% more fighters show up, and then 25% more show up. What would our counselor then do at that point to reduce the outlays to maintain some integrity to our capital, but still, to the best of our ability, service our fighters? I mean, I would say to him, do a plan. You know, find realistic circumstances that theoretically could occur, and when they go negative, when they go south, when they go red, what would you recommend, what would you and your colleagues recommend that we do to provide some service for the people who have come forward, but also to save some capital for the people who will be coming forward in 10 years from now? And that's what they do for a living.
That's a very good idea, and I think at some point, a while ago, you provided that, so maybe it's time to update that.
Okay.
The city of Chicago at one time had a police force where, as the Christmas holidays approached, they would, all of these stupid Irish cops, most of whom were drunks or crooks, they would determine how many people they could arrest before they began to fill the jails up to a point that they had to do overtime and could not go home for the holidays. It was a very simple proposition that even these Irishmen could figure out. Sober. And
Okay,
I just think at some point we need to turn this over to the professionals and step back and say, do your best.
That was awesome. I love that. That was awesome.
I didn't have my microphone on. Thank you.
John McCarthy, stay behind the well, please, right there. I think you have a request, and I don't feel like any of
I'm
us
from
would
County
not.
Roscommon. I can say that and get away with it.
But yeah.
Commissioners, I don't feel like anyone would disagree with Commissioner
No, I think
Sada's
that's a
request,
perfect
right?
idea.
Okay,
And
so-
I think that there was such a plan at, some years ago that was done, so perhaps it's time to update that.
And I can provide investment return assumptions to Beth, and Beth, if you, can put together the 20% increase, as you mentioned, in distributions, and then hopefully
Don't make us feel confident.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I do think he has an excellent point. I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to say, is Raymond James doing as well here as those unfortunate people in whatever they call themselves who represent the Chicago, the pensioners here in the state of California?
CalPERS.
Yeah, CalPERS. You know, give us some assurance or something to judge that your service is more effective than CalPERS.
Sure, absolutely.
Which I think just throwing a dart at the wall would probably establish a higher.
And as I mentioned,
Today.
the goal and the objective of the Boxers Fund is different than either CalPERS or CalSTRS. Our participants, the actuarial data is life expectancy is different.
We just want to outperform.
But I'd be happy to
Okay,
provide it
yes.
as an informational resource.
So
Sure.
when you do these scenarios for us,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if, for example, and maybe it's Andy that draws these conclusions, we work together. So, you know, to Martha's point, if out of the 177, in 18 months from now, we have found 77 of them. And now Andy knows automatically when the 77th shows up, he has to go to the promoting community and ask for another addition to the pension fund contribution. You know what I mean? So there's steps, there's numbers, and then there are actions that would follow.
Right.
Okay? Okay.
We need a business plan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That'd be a big help to
Absolutely.
us. Okay? Okay. Anything else for our Beth and Cyril? And thank you very much for being
you very
patient with
much.
us and all this great information. Also very helpful. Mr. Foster, you would like to go back to your executive officer's report? I believe you were on item D, update on CSAC Sports Concussion Management Protocol.
Can I go back one second? Mr. Foster, you and I spoke, and you mentioned that there was a boxer who received his distribution, and there was a statement that he made about how important this pension distribution was. Perhaps you can share that with the commission?
Yes, Ms. Vice Chairman, Sean Wells told me that the fighter came up to him at the All-Star event back in November, I believe it was, and told him that, look, I got the pension. I didn't know about it. I found it. I got it. And it really, I mean, according to Sean, he said it changed his life. It helped him a whole lot. And I think he started a business or something with it, so a small business. But it was a good story that Sean was real pleased about that.
That's nice.
And Martha, I think you should be proud of your efforts, and Mary and Luis, and the efforts you guys have made to bring it this far. It's come up, as you pointed out, a long way,
And yours
a
too?
long way. So, I mean, it's not like we're not trying, all right, but we're going to make it better.
Thank you, sorry to interrupt.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking for my notes.
Item
We-
D.
Yeah, we developed the CSAC concussion, sports concussion management protocol. This is hand in hand with the C3 Logics program. In fact, this is what this is. The MAC met last Saturday to discuss this plan. The goal is to baseline 300 athletes in 2017. Now, that's a fluid goal. I can come back to you the March meeting and say we can do better than that. That's my hope. But I will make 300 happen. I can write that down, okay? Some of this has to do with appropriation levels, okay? And as I pointed out to you earlier in the day about the budget, you saw the 32,000 that they're projecting, that Mark's projecting that we're not going to spend. It's a fluid number. If we get a bunch of events, that number's going to go sharply down, okay? What is lucky is is we are going to test 300 athletes. I think we can do more, okay? As I sit here today, right now, I can tell you we've done 35 so far, okay? So we're over 10% there, okay? And the test, and by the way, I've got the test here. If any commissioner would like to take it, be happy to give it to you, okay? I got the test here. It's
Bless you.
It's incredibly easy to administer. But at the same time, and anybody that takes it, and I think Dr. Williams can probably speak to this a lot better than I can, but I could just tell by giving it to the fighters on Tuesday, because I gave it to a bunch of fighters on Tuesday. If you were concussed, you could not do well on this test. It's not, I mean, it's difficult. I don't know if it's not, but anyway, that's our concussion management protocol. I'll be happy to share more about it. Basically, it's 6 modules. One involves balance, one involves memory recall, one involves symptoms. Be happy to give it to you. We're going to do 300 fighters. We're going to get the debuts. The debuts are prioritized, okay? The high-risk fighters, prioritized, and fighters above, and I believe that's fair. It's no discrimination there. I think that's fine. We require ARP medicals on 40 and over. They're prioritized, okay? But the idea is to get everybody. It's just, you know, I think it's a fair statement to say high-risk fighters are more susceptible to concussions than low-risk fighters. There's nothing wrong with saying that. That's not, and I think the debut fighters gives us a baseline so we can begin to track. And certainly at the amateur level, be even better. But we can certainly begin to track at their professional career the neurocognitive decline. Okay, let me be very clear to this commission. Dr. Williams can speak to this a lot better than I can, but I've taken some trainings in this stuff. I've taken 2 or 3 trainings with Frank, and I learned this. Nobody's trying to hide that boxing's necessarily great for your health. We're not saying that. Okay, we're not saying that. What we're trying to do is this will let you know better when you can return to your approximation of baseline. If you can't turn to your approximation of your baseline, the idea is you try to get new therapies. We keep you out of the ring and out of the sparring until you return to your baseline. Because if you can't return to your baseline, Dr. Williams, you probably speak to this better, you probably shouldn't be getting hit in the head again.
I agree. I mean, there's, yeah, thank you. You know, all along, we've contemplated this C3 Logics program from the context of improving fighter safety. There's a couple different things that we want to do when we collect the data, but the data essentially is going to help us with determining a few different things. Number one, I think it should be part of the licensure, that examination for licensure, to ensure there's some baseline, you know, neurologic function, you know, below which we would say, hey, wait a minute, this person would need extra testing, or maybe we wouldn't license them to fight. Number two is this concept of safe return to combat. Every other sport, John mentioned NFL and NBA and so on and so forth. Every other sport has a concussion protocol that doesn't judge fitness to return to play on the calendar. They say, no, you need to be able to demonstrate some functional ability, some return to baseline of your neurologic function. And so we've wanted to use this to help with that effort. Number three has to do with this issue of retirement. And there may be scenarios where we do advise people that, hey, it may be time to hang it up because we see this progressive decline in their function. Not that this in and of itself would do that, but this would be a piece of information along with other things. We may require or request or recommend imaging or other more formal neuropsychological testing. And then also this concept of neurologic impairment over time. So, you know, at some point, ideally, we have information from amateur up through professional ranks, and then even after retirement, where you can test people serially and see what's going on with their cognitive function.
But that was kind of what we contemplated in terms of why we want to do this in the first place. So you're right, Andy. Part of it would have to do with us saying, hey, based on what we see, the pattern that we see here, this is a discussion we need to have, retirement for that particular fighter.
Okay. It's a great report. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thanks, Andy. You want to tell us about, you've included the event schedule?
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question? You brought it up, Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams, thank you. As far as when people have to have their neurological exam when they're initially licensed, are we doing the baseline then?
No, the answer is no, okay? But we've only done it this week, okay? It's an excellent idea. I have every plan to speak to Dr. Gluckman's office about that very thing, because that would be ideal, okay?
Get everybody at the front door.
Yeah, because they're coming in to take their neurological exam. What about having one of his staff, like Pedro or somebody, administer the test? Very easy to do, and then we can get them right then. Considering, I would say, a good 50% of the athletes in Southern California go by his office at some point or another, it makes some sense to me. Is that good? Yeah, I'm working on it, yeah.
Doing great.
You've got the event schedule? in
Yes,
the
sir.
packets?
Yes, sir.
That?
Yes, sir. Just quickly, the Hopkins fight's tomorrow, UFC's tomorrow, HBO's tonight. I would point this out. This is related to the event schedule, Mr. Duke. HBO co-main event, gone. You guys saw that from dehydration issues, okay? So that won't be on the card tonight. They're moving I believe the Tapia fight up. 6 fights this weekend. We got one yesterday, got 5 more. King of the Cage will conclude for the year. Next year, I would recommend to the commissioners January 21st at the Forum in Los Angeles, Bellator, Sonnen versus Ortiz. It's a fantastic fight. I'd recommend that one. San Jose, I believe it's the 18th or 19th of February. You have Fedor. Fedor Emelianenko's making his return to California. Against Mitrione. So I think those are good fights. And we just received an HBO Top Rank show coming in March to the StubHub Center. I'll certainly update the schedule and get that out to you. Good, looks like a solid winter schedule for the commissioners.
Thank you.
Moving along, sir, at the last meeting of last year, and then again at the Fighter Summit, Chairman Carvelli made it very clear that he wanted to focus on education this coming year. And it was my goal to have this done, actually a little earlier than it got done, but we got it there, okay? And the video's completed. I have it available.
You sent us the links.
I did, sir, and you've probably already watched it, but it's here if you would like to watch it. Maybe now's not the appropriate time, but it's done, and it's on that TV.
So thank you.
Yep.
And I think they're a great thing to have as part of our arsenal. Hope the commissioners have had a chance to.
And where is it being shown? And is it being shown officially anywhere, or how are we distributing it?
Not yet,
Okay,
not yet.
another issue, okay, got it.
It's not an action item. I assumed I could do it ministerially since it was kind of talked about at commission meetings, and I could put it up. Do I need a vote? I mean, there's, okay, yeah, I think that, okay. So it'll be going up in 2017, early 2017, okay? They're still doing a few little things to it, but it's 99.9% done.
How much did it cost?
Sir, that's one of the benefits of the pro rata that we pay, okay? And to your point, this is something that I figured this thing out a little bit, honestly. The department has lots of services, okay? And I have determined I'm going to utilize those services, and that's what I do. Yeah,
You're not.
yeah.
They're actually so good, if you haven't seen it. Dr. Williams was amazing, amazing. Dr. Ayub was really good. John McCarthy was his miserable self, but he was still really good.
And I might point out just to that point that Commissioner Souter just brought up, after this meeting is done, I'm taking Mr. McCarthy straight over to DCA to the film studio, and we're going to record another video about the changes to the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts that'll go up. So, yeah, we're definitely trying to utilize the services that the Pro Rata provides.
Great work, thank you.
Thank you.
Another great accomplishment this year that I failed to list in my opening remarks.
Just quickly on the MAC meeting, on the next thing on my report, the minutes were approved, the unified rules were approved by the MAC. The C3 Logics testing protocol was done, the criteria was established, the debuts, those that are high risk, that have been stopped their last fight, KO, TKO, the fight with people with 20 fights or more, and athletes that are over the age of 40, just to add this to the ARP medical requirement battery. And the criteria was unanimously approved.
You know, Dr. Williams, you wanted to add anything about the MAC meeting? Are you pleased with its progress?
The MAC meeting I thought was very productive and efficient. We did have information and found out that one of the advisory committee members, Dr. Jerome Lisk, who's a neurologist from Pasadena, is relocating to Texas. So we may have that position to fill. But otherwise, it was an efficient meeting, and I don't have anything to add outside of what Andy mentioned.
Just for the record, so it goes in the minutes, the indemnification of ringside physicians was discussed. Mr. Duke wrote us I don't know if you'd exactly call it an opinion, but it was a legal letter from the DCA. And he is since working to amend it based on some stuff that came out of that, basically making sure that the doctors know that they are indeed indemnified at the weigh-in, at the fight, doing post-bouts, anything that revolves their work as a ringside physician.
Would you send that to me?
Yes, sir.
Email that to me?
I have it with me, sir. Yes, sir. Because we know this has come up many times, and we are really down on ringside physicians in Northern California for the fights that you guys stay at tomorrow here in the UFC. You'll see two doctors from Fresno, because we have no doctors left in Sacramento that are trained and ready to go. So we got that. Then we also had a talk, and this is again just a discussion. I'm just relaying the information to the full commission. This idea that these fighters are entitled to this 2-hour runaround after they weigh in was discussed, okay?
2-hour, run to drop weight, got it, okay.
Yeah. They're already dehydrated beyond belief. Then they step on the scale after they have been trying for weeks to make this weight, and they're 1.5 pounds over. And then we suddenly just, and when I say we, it's just been the nature of the industry. I want my 2 hours. Here they go. That was certainly discussed. And we wanted the ringside physicians, and Dr. Wallace is going to talk with ringside physicians to know that they're empowered to say, no, this is not a right. This is not an entitlement that you have. You can't do this anymore for your health and safety. Start rehydrating and take the fine. And that's something that was discussed. Fair statement. So that was discussed at the MAC.
Would that be codified in some way?
Sir, I think so in the future.
I mean, I think it puts them in a terrible position. Some might feel competent or inclined to say something like that, and others might not. It might be a very hostile environment. I don't see why we cannot say, you can't do it. You weigh in, that's it. You don't get 2 hours for some dastardly deed. But I say I don't know anything about this, but I think it's very precarious to go to, in this case, a doctor, and say, well, use your best judgment. And the doctor on Saturday may say, take 2 hours. The doctor on Sunday may make a subjective, visceral decision in his case and say, don't take the 2 hours, you're done. I think once you put a randomness into the administrative process, you're putting our doctors in jeopardy, and we're unclear as to what our feelings are.
Perhaps I see the other side. I think that's in your medical discretion. Is this person already, so dehydrated that it's a medical problem and a danger, or did this person accidentally have a salty drink or something? I see both sides. But if we want to make some strict rule that you won't get that window if you don't make weight the first time, then so be it. But I don't want to legislate a doctor's discretion.
Yeah, and that was kind of the feeling of certainly Dr. Wallace, but even the other people on the committee at that meeting, was there may be rare circumstances where you felt that was reasonable to do, but it certainly shouldn't be like it is now, where it's almost felt like it's a right, like you're obligated to allow these people 2 hours and further contribute to dehydration and what have you. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why we didn't go immediately to this, all or none. But I think people felt like we're moving toward never allowing it. And the first step was to say that, there may be some rare circumstances, but it's certainly not a right.
I can tell the commissioners that maybe I have, but I don't recall ever receiving feedback on any agenda item on any MAC meeting in the past. However, this went up on the internet and my phone started ringing.
Which issue? About
The running around.
2 hour run around.
The promoters are very interested in this issue.
Well, they should be.
They should be.
And they should be most interested in the health of the fighters.
The only thing I can see is maybe somebody taking on a last-minute fight. If a fighter falls out and then somebody comes in at the last minute and takes a last-minute bout, and that has happened, and that person, maybe that's the only thing I can think of. And
Or they
then
fly
that
in late.
Right, and that person might be at a real disadvantage, but that's the only thing I can think of.
It's going to take, on the part of some physicians, a real sense of determination and strength to say it's over on the verge of a major fight.
Of course it is.
I don't think it's going to happen, quite frankly. And I see this as protecting the physicians. And also, I think could be a legal vulnerability. If a doctor on Saturday says in one circumstance yes, and the next day, in another circumstance but directly parallel, says no, and somebody is pushed out of a fight, and there's a major loss of revenue for the promoter and for the fighter. I just think we're in a business where you cannot have, well, maybe yes and well, maybe no.
So should we agendize this for our next meeting and perhaps a draft regulation?
What we can do is we can take it back up at the next MAC meeting, or have Dr. Wallace and, appoint a committee to talk about it, and give some more specific direction to the commission.
What was the feedback of the promoters that when your phone was ringing?
It's a terrible idea.
They want to show.
But it's a safety issue. It goes hand in hand with our anti-dehydration policy.
It
I don't know if
does.
it's a MAC. I mean, it is in the sense of,
Right.
we're taking it out of their hands if we do a reg.
What Van said was actually brought up, that there are physicians and people who've been around a longer period of time who will be, I guess, more emboldened to stand up and say, no, it's not going to happen, and others who would probably be a lot more influenced by,
And I would use the term intimidated.
I think that's,
Pressured, yeah, they're under a great.
When's the next MAC meeting?
it was February. Wasn't it February? I believe it was. I believe
So
it was February.
before our regular meeting?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we could maybe defer it to the MAC and see what they think, and then it'll be on our next agenda. Can we do that?
Yeah.
All right.
And maybe ask if there are specific circumstances.
Giving you a break, Andy.
There would be an
I mean, John.
exception, and if not, then just not.
I will say this, and just so you know, on the MMA side, regarding this particular issue, when the commission passed the early weigh-in regulation that Sophia has been working on, but it's an emergency form, it was used actually this morning, just down the street. But when they passed the early weigh-in, we've taken the position, and legally, we're on solid ground here. The weigh-in's between 10 to 12, or 9 to 11. Some of the fighters believe that, they're sitting there in the saunas, by the way. They're doing everything they can to lose this weight. They're not getting close. They're getting closer, but not getting close. So some of them at the Bellator in San Jose just recently decided they had a new scheme. They showed up at 10:59 and got on the scale, and they were over. And they said, "I want my 2 hours." And I said, "Nope." It began at 9.
You're already saying no.
We are on the MMA side on these early weigh-ins, but I do think it needs to be addressed further because this is a culture in boxing, and this is a boxing state.
So let's do this. So I think Dr. Williams and Andy, if you haven't heard where the commission's coming from on this, you weren't listening, right?
Yeah.
So we have our concerns. We would like some more information. We're asking our very qualified and active MAC under the direction of Dr. Williams to take this up again and come back and tell us what you all think. We'd really appreciate that as a next step. So thank you. Thank you for that. With regard to things that the MAC, if I could also suggest, maybe an elevated discussion on recruitment of ringside physicians and what we can do to help with that, some recommendations and.
Yeah, that was discussed as well. And one of the things that they thought would really be helpful is, settling the indemnification issue. They thought, everyone thought that would go a long ways toward recruiting more physicians. So that'll be big. And particularly for physicians who work in certain environments, like the UC system or that kind of thing, that was a critical aspect of their inability to participate to date. So when that issue is settled, or with that being settled, the feeling is that there'll be a lot more opportunity to recruit.
So now the idea is to get that information out there.
Exactly.
So maybe we could talk about the ways that we're going to do that. While you're looking for those missing boxers, try to find some, there's a joke, try to find some doctors.
What about this suggestion of maybe approaching some of these medical schools and getting a rotation of maybe like sports medicine and having them rotate through, especially at weigh-in? Maybe not at the events necessarily, but it's usually the weigh-in that we have such a hard time with, because it's usually either on a Thursday with Bellator or Friday with the other events, and Friday is usually the time when the doctors have such a hard time taking time off work. And, maybe having like one doctor, and, or even, if they're already about to finish with residency or whatever it is, having them do their sports medicine residency and have them rotate, or something like that, so that we can leverage that.
Yeah, we talked about the kinds of physicians that would probably be most easily recruited, and obviously the sports medicine docs, whether it's family practice or orthopedic sports medicine, emergency room, neurology as well. I think you're right. We got to find creative ways to reach them, and maybe we can reach them in their residency programs. But we also have, for instance, there's a section in the American Academy of Neurology of sports neurologists. There are also state societies and that. So I think that there's a number of different ways we can go about recruiting. We just need to
And if we
start the
can help in
outreach.
any way, let us know. We'll.
And then the last thing for maybe the MAC, I think Vice Chair Lehman pointed out that we all approved an alternative for you, is that correct? Did we?
Oh. Remember when we read our, didn't we have like person we wanted to make an alternate on the MAC? Because was it a
Yeah,
woman?
the doctor,
we really liked?
that big doctor, the buff guy.
Dr. Allende,
Yeah,
yeah, he wants to do it, so
Oh,
we can rotate him
Now
in
we might
there.
have an opening.
Yeah, he wants to
If we
do
can
it.
do that and not
He'll be
go.
thrilled. He asks about me every time he talks to me.
Right.
that's okay with you, Dr. Williams? Yeah, there you go. So
Okay.
Because we just didn't have room.
I'll let him know. He's gonna be thrilled. He asks about it every time I see him.
tell him he's got to show up.
Oh,
But
he
has to
will.
recruit-
we
Has
say.
to recruit 3 ringside doctors.
Okay,
We'll see him tomorrow, sir.
good, excellent. That was letter G, right?
Yes, sir.
So now we're on H.
Yes, sir. Letter H, if you'll just turn to your summary that I put together.
This is me.
I wrote this, and by the way, the MMA gloves and the boxing gloves are on purpose.
She's not really punching properly, though.
That's true.
You should have gotten a real person to.
This came out of Commissioner Souter made comments at the last meeting of 2015, talking about how it'd be nice to have a summary of various commission data points so we can track it year to year. I don't know why I hadn't ever thought of that before. I mean, certainly we track information, but I never had
You're
thought
just
of.
a young man, you're learning.
Yeah. Well,
Starting to figure it out.
and so,
So, of course, it's for all the commissioners to comment on, that I love having something like this for my own, purposes, particularly, and then being used to running around in Sacramento, having to deal with folks here, to have something to hand to stakeholders and decision makers and lawmakers, I think is great, and I hope that you will get this out to the B&P committee folks and the entertainment committee folks and various staff folks and folks in the governor's office, if you would.
yes, sir.
And another example of pro rata.
Ah,
Another
we-
example of what?
Pro rata.
Pro rata.
they design it.
Pro rata. We're in the pro rata generation business.
Isn't that would be helpful?
I would have a suggestion. I think, I don't know how you do it, but I'm sure there's ways it can be done, and maybe with some of those people at USC, to estimate the dollar value of this broad range of combat sports.
Okay.
What kind of money is spent in this state
Yeah, we talked
for
about,
box office, for television, for what all that may be?
Or maybe tax revenue.
we talked about
And
this,
throw tax revenue in too.
right? We talked about maybe adding that to this, but it was,
It's a hell of a piece of work. I think it's marvelous.
Yeah.
First one out, I think it's fabulous.
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Thank
for
We
all
talked
that
about this,
effort.
but it already went to print. And if you're going to change this at all, maybe get somebody who's punching properly.
Somebody's what?
Who's punching properly, because she's gonna break her mouth.
Martha, you're overlooking the aesthetics of this.
Or just teach her how to punch properly.
Yeah, you're right.
Retake the picture.
Just a couple of points I'd point out briefly, because I know we've got to move along. The commission's, we had one cancellation when this went to print, so this says 140, we're going to do 139, professional events. Boxing is far and away, this is a boxing state, it's far and away. 64% boxing, 32% mixed martial arts event, 2% kickboxing, 2% mixed events. And then when you flip it over and you look at the revenue streams, that corresponds pretty close. Kickboxing drops. What I'm telling you right now is, at least for us, maybe it's different for some people, but kickboxing's a money loser for this commission, okay?
what?
A money loser, okay?
Major-
A money loser. We don't make money with kickboxing.
But it's also,
segue
it's
into our
a,
next-
it's a farm
Of course it is.
arena to bring
And I'm
people
not
up to
saying we
MMA,
shouldn't do
right,
it.
Yeah, and
But
it's a safety, right?
it's, you can see that it's 2%, actually drops below 1% when you compare it to the revenue, okay? Boxing stays static, MMA actually picks up where kickboxing lost, okay?
Just like when we talked to Beth, though, Andy, and try not to use words like forfeit. Perhaps money loser is not accurate. Perhaps
Sure.
it's an investment in young athletes or revenue neutral or some other buzzword that we can.
We're going to bring it back up.
It's a non-volatile.
We're developing it. We're developing.
Something in the next one, I would say to put in there is what is the motivating force of the athletic commission?
Our mission
What are we
statement.
charged to do? Protect the fighters, ensure competitive competition, whatever, but something that says what we do. I think a couple sentences would do that, because I don't think most people know what the State Athletic Commission does.
Sure.
In the statute.
Yes, sir.
But boy, this is I love the graphics, as erroneous as they may be. They're really quite nice.
One thing that I pointed out to the MAC with this document is if you look on page 4, it takes the results in boxing, and we're at 41% KO, TKO rates, which is, double amateur, as we talked about at the last meeting. And then decision or retire on the stool, 56%, and something else at 2%. And if you compare that to mixed martial arts, you see almost the same thing regarding the KO, TKO rate. They're at 43%, but you see 25% of mixed martial arts bouts in California got stopped in with a submission, which is you can't do in boxing, and then 32% decisions. And then it just has the licensee data and the neurological update.
I was quite intrigued by your observation that in the other states, mixed martial arts were the dominant form of competition.
Yes, sir.
But in California, it's boxing.
Yes, sir.
The only state, really,
Yes, sir.
that has boxing in that position.
Yes, sir.
Fascinating.
I think Texas is probably close to 50-50, but really, there's no state that's, 64, and MMA is still an emerging sport, incredibly popular. I would point this out to all the commissioners. This could start to change if we sign more tribal compacts. Mixed martial arts is happening in California. We're just not regulating it. I can assure you, way more than 44 events happened in mixed martial arts in California. There were well over 100. It's just, we only regulated 44 of them. So I'd point that out.
But on the other hand, would you say also, Andy, that one of the reasons they have more mixed martial art, or they have mixed martial arts and tribal, is because it doesn't fall under the Ali Act? It's hard to say.
It doesn't what?
Fall under the Ali Act, and therefore they can have mixed martial arts without us having to regulate it.
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is some of the promoters try to avoid our medicals. Because avoid the commission's medical requirements. Okay, it's not so much to pay the commission a couple of $1,000s to regulate the contest. It's something entirely different to have 20 fighters undergo an MRI, a neurological, all these things that cost $600 or $700 for each fighter, and the promoter's oftentimes the person looking at that. When you're looking at a 20 fighter card and you've got $700 a fighter, you're looking at a $14,000 expenditure level. On top of paying us the regulatory fees.
So once they sign the compacts, and then they have to follow our guidelines and regulations, it's entirely possible that they will have more boxing as well, because it doesn't matter whether it's MMA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So it may or may not change, we don't know. The breakdown, the percentages.
And that's a good point. Okay, I'm finished, sir, with my report.
Good work.
Thank you.
Good work, very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 7, discussion, review, and possible action regarding the delegation of amateur kickboxing to the International Kickboxing Federation, IKF. Mr. Fossum, would you come up and join us, please? Mr. Foster, would you set this up for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the commission delegated amateur kickboxing. I want to be very clear about the amateur kickboxing to Mr. Fossum, to the IKF in March of 2014. So far, the IKF has sanctioned 131 events here in California. I work with Mr. Fossum on a near daily basis certainly when there's professional kickboxing involved, just like I do with JT Steele with the Pro-Ams. We run Pro-Am with kickboxing as well. We do have several events every year that are high-profile kickboxing, specifically the Glory Kickboxing Show. And Mr. Fossum, there's usually an amateur component. We work hand in hand in that, and he helps me with the pro matchmaking as well. So I've been pleased. I have his financials. Certainly provide that to the commissioners if they'd like to see it. I've been pleased. I'm happy with what I'm seeing. I recommend the commission give him a delegation for amateur kickboxing and just have the normal reporting requirements like JT Steele with Camo and John Frank with USFL.
Hello, Mr. Fossum, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself, and then, we took away your earlier
That's okay.
meeting report, so maybe you can combine it all up and give us an overview of where you are.
Steve Fossum with the IKF, and Andy pretty much summed up the general basics, and rather than be long-winded and keep you guys here a lot, I'll just go right to if you have any questions and save you the time.
Give us like 30 seconds of selling yourself, okay?
I'm sorry.
You were too polite, right?
Inspire some questions.
As Andy mentioned, since late March of 2014, we've sanctioned and regulated 131 events, and it's been growing every year. And
15?
14.
14.
Late March of 2014. And we've really helped promote the game, especially the Muay Thai side. Muay Thai was kind of a lost child out there in regards to the regulatory aspects of it, in regards to officials and the rules and regulations of things that they knew for scoring and judging and refereeing. We really worked with a lot of great referees that have upped the game there, great judges. A lot of them are CSAC officials as well. We try to implement them as much as possible so they don't lose sight of the Muay Thai and kickboxing when things such as, like Andy mentioned, comes to California for pro events, for example, so they're not out of the game, so they're still versed in their knowledge and use for judging and refereeing those sports. And we've tried to build it as much as possible and also do things such as training events where they're like a sparring event where fighters get a chance to try the sport out to see if they like it. It's also a good mechanism for us to help train our referees to get them more skilled at not just the mechanics but the other aspects of being a referee and things that have to be done. Timekeepers, it's helped out tremendously as well. And in a nutshell, that's kind of a general 401 of what's been going on.
Thank you.
And we would,
Thank you very much.
I did note in your report, which I think is very admirable, is that the number of smokers has really gone down since you've been regulating it, because it gives the framework, it gives safety, and that's so important, and that's not actually on our chart here, so
yeah,
that's a
there
great
are a
thing.
few that still happen every year, and whenever I find out about them, as soon as I do, sometimes it's in time and not in time, but I'll forward an email or a poster to Andy and see if there's anything that can be done about those. We are going to be taking different action in 2017 for fighters who participate on those and trainers who participate on those for obvious reasons.
But you're providing a forum, you're
Completely.
taking away the need for that, which
Absolutely.
is very important for this commission.
Driving them into the light. Start on this, and Commissioner Satter, do you have any questions or comments?
no.
Yes, sir. Vice Chair, anything more?
About, I think, great work on the database and working with USFL and your suspensions. You know, I think you were with USFL as like the paradigm for where our nation needs to move together of all the different combat sports, working together on the amateur level and dovetailing up to the professional level. It makes the sports better, matchmaking better, and keeps people safer. And so I think that's a great thing that's happening.
Thank you. And like I mentioned last meeting, the biggest challenge we find in that is the cross-referencing of these fighters that are going into other form of fighting sports, but also, as you heard today in the presentation, it's other sports in general, soccer, football, rugby. You know, there's so many unknowns out there that we'll probably never know. I mean, and I like to think that I kind of overdo things a lot of times as far as being too detailed, but even with our detail in that, there's things that we're going to miss and other people are going to miss. I mean, you know, and having been a victim of that where we didn't know about someone who got injured prior, there's always a saying that I've heard many, many times: fighters don't die in the ring, they die from something that brought them to that point. And if we'd have known about certain points, you know, I mean, for every commission, you know, a lot of these deaths wouldn't be occurring, but there's a lot of things that we'll probably never know, because whether they just don't want to be honest because they want to fight and they think that's past them. I think the concussion ideas that's being brought up here today are going to be great tests to prepare people to, you know, to know if they're ready to step in that ring again. So yeah, there's a lot of unanswered question there, but hopefully we're on the right path together to try to accomplish that. So.
Thank you.
Dr. Williams? Commissioner?
I think you've done a really terrific job regulating the amateur kickboxing, and I know we've had, you know, a few hiccups over the last year or so, not in connection with your regulation. I think that's been really, really well done, just in connection with, you know, a few websites things, but you've always been very compliant whenever Andy's asked you to do things, and we really appreciate that. I hope that continues to be the case, and, you know, we just don't want to keep looking at that. So, again, we really appreciate that, and thank you for doing such a good job with your regulating, and I think that's really all.
Thank you.
How about that?
Thank you, Mark.
That's not easy to get from Commissioner Murtha. Should be proud of that. I made a comment to you, but I meant it earlier, about working with John, and I know you are, and it's a great thing, and with JT, but maybe working with this, what's it called, the presentation you had on the AB 2007 compliance system.
Compete safe.
Right. So maybe that's the best way to describe it to you all, to you gentlemen. You know, we need to be compliant with AB 2007, obviously, and the commission will participate in helping find ways to be compliant, right, to implement the compliance aspect. And so
Yeah, and we want to even
good thing.
advance that to the adult side of our program too, not just the youth. I know the law is 18 and under, but we feel something like that is extremely beneficial to anybody at whatever age they're fighting. So a lot of our stuff that we're going to be implementing is going to be all the ages, not just the juniors. So.
And we'd like to be updated on that, I think, for the next meetings.
It's
We
going to
can
be a
all-
valuable database for
Right.
us to look up stuff. Yeah, of course, like I said last meeting, we're not going to be able to find out someone fought in Arizona or Nevada or Wisconsin, whatever. You know, if they're not going to tell us, we don't know. So it's going to be a lot of everything outside of California is going to be on a trust basis. But one thing that's helped California is by giving one entity organizational regulatory duties over the sport in one area. You don't have, if we were to suspend someone, for example, for being on a medical, he's not going to, he or she's not going to jump over and fight for another organization in the same state across town and still be able to do that. And that's one thing that helps with having CAMO and USFL and us as well as one regulatory body, whereas we go to states, I don't need to mention the states, you probably know them, where they have 4 or 5, if not 10 or 12 in one of them in particular. If a fighter gets suspended here, they're fighting somewhere else 2 weeks down the line because they have so many sanctioning bodies for the amateur sport that they just allow them to do whatever they want, basically. And that's something I think is a big plus for what's happening in California.
It's a sad aspect of combat sports, but maybe they'll catch up. Commissioners, I think we need a motion to approve, and the recommendation is for 1 year to approve the, sir, is that correct, Andy?
Is it 1 year, or is it?
It was 1 year.
We're going 1 year.
Okay.
So may I have a motion?
That I move to extend our delegation to IKF on the same terms as our other delegatees, USFL and CAMO, and to be revisited in a year.
Second.
We have a Vice Chair first, Commissioner Shanky is second. Mr. Foster, would you please call the roll?
Well,
Oh, wait,
if I
I'm
can just
sorry.
make a comment, and you should ask for the comments from people.
We're together on that, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to explain that when the commission set forth its initial delegation on March 17th, 2014, the motion was, after discussion regarding the rules and reporting requirements, Commissioner Lehman made a motion to approve the IKF delegation with the same terms and oversight requirements as CAMO, and Commissioner Carvelli seconded the motion and it passed 5-0. The only reason why I mention that is that basically all you're going to be doing here is just continuing in the delegation. However, in looking over through my own files in my office, and unfortunately some of the record keeping was not as good as it should have been, what I've done is I've redrafted the formal delegation letter and made it consistent with the CAMO's letter, but I just excised all of the references to mixed martial arts and the peculiar, unique history of CAMO as opposed to IKF. And Mr. Fossum and I discussed all of the areas. There actually, because wasn't able to get it in time for the 10-day rule, Ms. Lehman.
Yeah.
We discovered there's probably a couple more tweaks we should make to the letter itself, and including, and Mr. Fossum may want to make comment about this, about including the term Muay Thai.
Muay Thai.
Muay Thai, I'm sorry. Muay Thai.
Or Mai
That's a
Tais.
drink, right?
Mai Tais would be better.
It's Friday afternoon.
Muay Thai, I'm sorry.
Take some egg rolls with that.
Okay with Mai Tais.
It's okay, I've heard it called other things too, so
So
it
Gary,
is
what
a
are you
learning
telling-
curve.
What are you telling us?
Oh, no, nothing. Oh, no, just that we want to probably include that terminology.
Okay.
that
And the
term,
reason, like
Muay
I
Thai.
explained to him, just for reference, is Muay Thai is a separate sport from kickboxing. Unlike back in the 90s when kickboxing was kind of the blanket name and all these other styles referred underneath it, you might say. Muay Thai has since, in the late 90s, early 2000s, completely separated itself from the term kickboxing.
I can
It's
show them
become
later.
its own thing, which is also noticeable in the Olympics today. Okay, I don't know if you heard about the Olympics being, approving Muay Thai, so, on a provisionary basis.
That's great.
Give you kind of a heads up there, so.
Okay, so we need a revised motion then from Vice Chair here to, what? Give us the,
It's the same, it's the same
the
thing.
same
It's
claim,
just, this is
just-
the documentation
just
of the
the supporting
delegation that didn't exist before. I wonder if you and I should just review it before it's signed and finalized.
Oh, certainly before it's signed. But,
okay.
so I'm not recommending that it actually be signed right now, this letter.
Okay.
Or agreement, rather.
So the motion should
Be
be,
revised to draft the official delegation letter and,
Yeah, so in fact, what I labeled it as is restatement and renewal of delegation of authority to the International Kickboxing Federation to administer rules for amateur kickboxing
okay.
and
and Muay
Muay Thai. So that's the motion.
Thai, correct.
So would you make that motion, please?
So just, do we vote on this at our next meeting, the actual letter?
No, that's not necessary. This is truly what I would consider a ministerial task.
Okay.
Because you pretty much already have set forth the conditions and terms, including that their rules and regulations meet or exceed the commission's
Okay,
requirements
okay.
for
And that
health
will
and
be
safety.
just between you three, you'll get it finalized?
Right,
Okay.
and I'll set it for Chairman Crivelli's signature at the
Okay,
bottom.
okay.
So,
I can provide you a copy of this, by the way, after the meeting. I can't provide it to you in the meeting without giving it to the public at this time.
10-day rule.
So,
revised motion.
so I revised the motion to extend the delegation to IKF under the same conditions as USFL and CAMO, and that, that Mr. Duke and Mr. Fossum and Mr. Foster will finalize the written delegation for Mr. Carvelli's signature.
Great.
Second.
Second. Now we'll have a chance for any public comment on the extension of the delegation to IKF. Please come forward if you wish to. Right, I don't see anyone standing up. And so with that, Mr. Foster, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Carvelli,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Lehman,
Aye.
Commissioner Senior Quidez,
Aye.
Commissioner Souter,
Aye, and 3 Mai Tais for the
Commissioner and Dr. Williams.
Aye. Why only three?
because I don't drink them.
Okay, agenda item, congratulations and thank you for your work.
Thank you, Steve.
Agenda item number 9, review and approval of proposed regulations to amend sections 201.5, 206, 260, and 294 of Division 2 of Title 4 of the California Code of Regulations regarding technical zones. Technical zone is the area located between the ring and the commission-approved barrier. Mr. Foster.
Chairman Carvelli, at the last meeting, I brought you an idea that we should maybe amend the regulations to include the definition and then the commission's jurisdiction over the technical zones. You guys, you voted to agree. I drafted language. The language is in your packet. Certainly, if you don't like the language, I work for you guys. Just tell me what to change.
I had a change. First of all, it's a great idea.
Thank you.
And I didn't know it was not an alcohol-free zone, so I didn't know that, so.
Well, we can make
It
it.
is.
I mean,
I've never drunk in the technical zone.
There is no rule right now. That's,
Oh, so this is a new thing?
Yeah, it's what's underlined. What's not underlined is existing.
Yeah, I knew, but I didn't know if there was no other rule previously that you could not drink.
We don't usually, but the
The
first
technical
row
zone.
always drink.
What does it say about
Aren't the
alcohol?
VIPs
I didn't
in
see
there?
that. Hang on a second.
It's in 201.5.
VIPs in there?
Oh,
Yeah, and they're always drinking.
I don't know if I'm okay with that part.
Can we make this an emergency reg? Because isn't there,
Well, yeah.
I don't think we really have the justification for it unless there was an actual incident that had
Well,
occurred.
there was a close incident.
In Texas.
yeah, Angel
Yeah.
Osuna.
Or in-
Because isn't there a correlation between when a fighter goes down, say there's a hemorrhage, and the time and how much time it takes to get the fighter to the hospital or to triage or to, because usually there are all these people, the ER people are always standing at a tunnel. They have to get all the way through to ringside, into the ring, and there's always people clamoring everywhere, and then they have to get them back out, as opposed to right at ringside, and then, right? So it's critical how much time it takes, isn't it?
Yes.
Wasn't that the Leo Santa Cruz fight where we were so squished in that even I felt like I
Right.
could not get out if I needed to?
Right.
That was not a good thing, that we were so squished in like that. So that I felt unsafe about that.
That won't happen again.
Yeah, but
I mean, just,
It's under the
you're not
sole
going to
control
be.
of
if there's a
executive
safety,
office.
I'm sorry, go
It's
ahead.
under the
Right.
Andy has sole control of deciding who
But
and
you're
what
trying
goes
to
in
come up with reasons for why it's an emergency.
So I'd like for Dr. Williams to tell us what is the time, why it's critical, first of all, medically, why there needs to be,
Well, they got to get to the hospital. I'm an EMT. They have to get to the hospital in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
The
but,
first
so are you
golden
saying that
20
without the technical zone, they won't make it in 20 minutes?
some,
I mean,
well, it depends on how many what
Fight,
the
if it's a
venue
huge big
is
fight.
and how much.
No, I think you can clearly make the argument that, time is brain, so to speak, so that, every second counts, and you want to minimize to, whatever extent possible, the time necessary to get to the fighter, administer whatever first aid needs to be administered, and then get them out.
The AED, you have to have 5 minutes. First 5 minutes are crucial for an AED.
So 5 minutes is not a very long time, and you've been there at the big shows. And if the emergency, if the ambulance people are standing at a tunnel, they have to cut through not just the VIP section, but the entire floor section, get to, by then, the trainers, the, corner people are up, everybody's standing, so that's very difficult. You've seen how much room is between even us, and it's very, very tough. And if it's a championship fight, sometimes people are drunk by then because everybody's it's very difficult. I know that after the Mago incident in New York, which was November, I think it was 12, 2013, we had an incident in Fantasy Springs. It was December, I think it was 16th, 2013, something like that. And he went outside of the ring. Junior was the Kais Jr. was the official, and he fell outside of the ring and hit his head, I think on the bell. And we don't know if, that caused it or he had a hard spar or something like that, but he came back into the ring, and Junior properly walked him around the ring, and then he fainted. And they got him to the hospital, and he was fine. It was but that's a very small arena, and everything worked fine. But if you were to transpose that situation into a very large arena with lots and lots of people, that would not have happened, because there would have been a lot of people in between. The distance to the hospital would have been a lot farther, not 5 minutes.
Emergency possibility?
I think it's a possibility. Again, the more incidents or examples that I could have to justify it, it's certainly worth trying. Because the worst that can happen is that they say, no, it doesn't meet the standards of OAL.
That's the one that where I first started thinking about something like this. We probably have, collectively dozens of incidences where something like this could have happened. Of course, we didn't have a problem because we have doctors who, and we have referees who stop the bout early enough but for us, it's prevention, and we don't want this to get to where it's a problem. So when it becomes a problem, this is California, we don't want it to be a problem. Once it gets to be a problem.
So would you maybe throw some of your examples to these
Sure,
guys?
we can come up with.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
And the medical stuff too, you have the AED in 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes without adequate oxygen leads to permanent brain damage. 5 minutes is not a very long time.
So I guess, Mr. Duke, what we're saying to you is we all feel that is a safety issue.
Sure.
That's our responsibility, so we are telling you that we'd like you to find a way to expedite this process.
Well, we got the headgear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That took a lot of
important.
explaining, believe it or not,
Yeah,
just
this
for them
is
to
more
understand the issue.
Right. You might also cite fire code issues, insurance liability. I mean, that gets people's attention. Liability, throw that word around a lot. Volatility, liability. Those are today's big buzzwords. Okay, when I was kidding about the alcohol-free zone, that's fine with me, although I hope that doesn't hinder any promoter from wanting to do an event with us or.
And look, we need to, this is proposed language. If we need to write something in, the goal here is safety. The goal is not to hurt the promoter. We need to be very clear of that.
I think if you put between a section, a designated section of the ring, so that you can, so for example, a Roy Engelbrecht, where he has right, where he has a section where he has, so you can designate, the commission can designate a section, and it could be all of it, depending on how the venue is situated, or it could be some portion of it, right?
Can I read it back to you then? I think that, what if it says technical zone means an alcohol-free barrier located between a section of the ring or cage and the commission-approved barrier?
Yeah.
I think you should leave the alcohol out. I think it's way too complicated. I think it's causing, I don't think, it's not an issue right now, is it?
No,
think
I got
the
this language from Texas.
Yeah, I think the access is the big issue, and so we're just creating an issue where there is
I agree
none.
with that. I missed that.
You
It does
know.
create a lot of.
Yeah, and if we want to address alcohol later, we can. And besides, that zone is in your sole control, Andy.
Yeah.
You can, if people are drunk, kick them out.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, if it's your zone, you can say whatever you want about that zone, whether it's alcohol-free, food-free, whatever free, right? It's your zone.
If I'm a promoter, I'm gonna look at that and go, what does this mean?
Alcohol's a big deal.
We don't want to mess with the promoters.
Huh?
We don't want, yeah, sir, I agree with you. We don't want to mess with the
Calls
promoters.
and extra work, yeah. Vice
It's
Chair's
not an
right.
issue right now.
But it's still your zone. You can do whatever you want with that zone, right?
Sure.
Okay.
And there've been times where I'd want to get the alcohol out. I think you guys have all been there when the beer cans started going.
Flying from way up in the peanut gallery.
'Cause then we'd have to add, weed and all kinds of stuff. Maybe not. Anyway, let's have a motion.
Oh, wait, I have a
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so the last, paragraph 4, subdivision A, it reads as proposed, all emergency personnel and portable medical equipment shall be located within the technical zone. I think that's overkill because a lot of times you'll have, 2 ambulances or multiple emergency people. So I think it should say, emergency personnel and portable medical equipment as determined by the executive officer or designee shall be located.
Okay.
Because you could have 2 sets of paramedics and you wouldn't want everybody in there.
Let me read it back to you. Emergency medical personnel and portable medical equipment shall be located within the technical zone as determined by the executive officer or designee during the event.
No, the as determined should come after the word equipment. Because you're determining who goes in there. You're not determining where the zone is.
Right.
Okay.
That makes sense,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it should be emergency medical personnel and portable medical equipment as determined by the executive officer or designee shall be located within the technical zone during the event.
Okay.
Okay.
Since we're altering the language, does the commission feel strongly one way or another about 260B? I certainly,
I was actually gonna ask you about that.
okay.
So since you brought it up, I thought that was already understood. There's no value, right?
Right.
There's no value to those seats in there.
They typically don't. I think Mr. Engelbrecht, which he doesn't exactly have a technical zone, but I think he does do some of that. Am I wrong?
Right, he does. He
Yeah.
has seats right at the ringside, so.
So they're not sold, that's the issue? They're given as comps? Is that the problem?
No, he sells those.
Like one side.
But most just comp people?
Yeah, I mean, they're not tickets for sale.
Uh-huh, okay.
You can't sell them even if you wanted to.
So what you're saying here is he'd have to get permission from you on that one side of the ring where he invites sponsors to pay to sit ringside.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm asking, sir, is this a needed regulation? Do we need to write this, or can we just strike B?
I think you got another complicated.
Yeah, because you're in total control of that area anyhow.
Let's, with your permission, I'll just get rid of that whole section and we'll leave the current language.
Thanks to Mary coming up. Wish you articulated the other thing. I'm just thinking about all the extra work you'd bring on yourself.
Sure.
Where you already have enough to do. Try to manage these details, yeah. Okay, commissioners, any other comments? Then could we have a motion to approve this as an emergency reg?
I so move.
I second.
I have a second. Let's invite some good folks up. Maybe you all would like to comment on something here about this. Anything? Or did we clean it up so it's okay?
It's
Nobody?
perfect,
Okay,
right?
all right. All right, so then, Mr. Foster, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Carvelli?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Lehman?
Aye.
Commissioner Souter? Aye. Commissioner Senior Quidez? Commissioner and Dr. Williams?
Aye.
5-0, sir.
Okay. We have a closed session, but the last thing is the review and approval of the calendar. This idea is to have something that for all to put on your calendars, but it's certainly, as we've done before, if somebody, everyone says, look, I can't make March 1st, and can we move it back? Of course, we can make adjustments. So it's not concrete, but it's at least a working set of dates. So if you guys are okay with that, I don't know if it needs some kind of formal. Does it?
Mr. Chairman, I would again
You don't need a
suggest
vote.
that instead of 2 back-to-back meetings in Los Angeles, we might try to find a casino somewhere.
Okay. So why don't we put a, to be determined in one of those LA meetings?
You can fly into Palm Springs,
Yeah.
and there's several over there.
Not in the summer.
Okay, you're right, there's summer dates.
Let me look it up.
So instead of the second Los Angeles, perhaps in October, we put a to be determined, and the goal there is a tribal casino situation, like Pachanga or something like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Chang is far from the airport, so.
Just an example.
Yeah.
March
We'll
14th.
keep these things somewhat fluid for everyone, because everyone's busy. So do we need some kind of a motion or any of this?
That's not necessary
Okay.
at this time, no.
So we have something we can all work with.
This is more for, I think, people's planning purposes, and then you can decide at each meeting where the subsequent meeting will be.
So that'll conclude our open session for now. We're going to go to closed session, agenda item number 11, so we'd ask everyone to leave except for Mr. Duke, and then we'll come and get you in the hall in a few minutes to take any public comment and then adjourn the meeting. So thank you all. Please give us,
Mr. Chairman, can I take a restroom break?
let's take a restroom break. Thank you, sir, for
What time?
Okay, we are back in open session. And for the final agenda item for this meeting, so agenda item number 12, public comment on items not on the agenda. The commission may not discuss or take action on any of these matters raised during public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on a future agenda. So at this point, anyone that would like to come up and address the commission is welcome on any matter. Seeing none, we thank you all. Agenda item number 13 points out the next meeting is now scheduled for March 14, 2017 in Los Angeles. I think I can speak on behalf of the commissioners and staff that we wish everyone health and safety, happy holidays for all. God bless, and this meeting is adjourned.